I want to share with you some experiences that I've had where I've seen, now this is very rare, I've seen a few people who don't have souls and why I came to that conclusion and what I think happens when we really do lose or disconnect from our soul. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different concepts of what a soul is through religion and spirituality, just a little tiny bit. I'm not an academic, as you know, and I'm sure there are people out there who are very well versed on the history of souls, but I want to set this video up just so you have a general understanding of the different concepts of what a soul is. And then I'm going to share with you my experience tuning in psychically to people that don't have souls. And as always, if you're enjoying my content, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe. Let's get stuck straight into it, shall we? In prehistory times, the soul would be considered simply having sentience, being alive, breathing, moving, being animated. And I feel like this is where shamanism comes from, because if you look at some shamanistic practices, it's always about honoring nature, honoring the sentience of things, and also honoring the non-sentience of things. So when something is alive and when something is dead. And for humans, the most obvious thing that tells us whether or not we are alive or dead is the breath and movement. So I think the idea and the concept of the soul would have been believing that you were sentient, noticing when you were living, and being able to move. Now let's move more into documented times. And of course, we're going to start with ancient Egypt. Egypt was the first culture to actually map the soul in detail. A person could have multiple soul parts, souls could be fragmented, united, souls could evolve, and death was a technical and ceremonial process. And this is where a lot of magical modern day systems evolved from, which is pretty damn cool. So let's move on to ancient India. They introduced that the soul is eternal and it reincarnates. So the idea of reincarnation speaks into Eastern systems, Hermetic thought, and New Age spirituality. In Hermetic and magical traditions, reincarnation is a part of samsara, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. So now we're going to move into, of course, ancient Greece. Greek philosophy also laid the foundations for Western mysticism, with not only the idea and the concepts of souls existing in their mythology, but also their philosophers were talking about what they believed the soul to be. If you do some research on Plato, he actually started talking about how the soul exists before the body does, and the soul already knows. But when the soul comes into the body, it goes into a state of not remembering, and then we spend our life learning lessons, thinking about ideas and concepts, and trying to remember what has been forgotten from our soul. So then we move more into religions and spiritual systems that believe that the soul was judged. We can look into Judaism, Christianity, Islam, as they kind of move the narrative into the soul being something that's very singular, that's morally accountable, and that God created. Now, this is where using guilt comes into controlling people and how they live out their everyday life. And you would have heard this a lot. People say your soul is going to be condemned, soul is going to hell. All of those fun, guilt-tripping concepts that people like to throw around as a way to control and suppress the expression of others. The idea of reincarnation completely disappears, except quietly in Kabbalah. Kabbalah and esoteric traditions generally believe that the soul evolves, that the soul is a state of consciousness that we work on evolving over time through our spiritual and day-to-day practices. We believe that the soul can also reach a state of enlightenment, therefore freeing us from samsara, allowing our soul to evolve and move on to whatever awaits it. So this feeds directly into the goal Golden Dawn, ceremonial magic, and Western occultism. So let's move on to modern psychology. Now, as someone that reads people's minds for a living, I am fascinated and obsessed with the human psyche and the subconscious and how it all works and fits together. And how it all works and fits together. So this is where I'm going to start to move into sharing my experience, because psychology looks at the soul as consciousness, as the mind, the psyche, or the subconscious, where there's different parts, there's fragmentations, there's personality traits. It's kind of where science meets spirituality. So this is where I come in. So as a professional psychic that specializes in reading the subconscious mind, but also talking to spirit guides, I kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And this is where I'm going to share the story about tuning into people psychically who don't have a soul. So let's talk about the first one, where the soul is almost gone. So let's start with the person who I looked at that was almost losing their soul. And this was through addiction, specifically alcohol and any type of substances, whether it be pharmaceutical or illegal, that numb the experience. Now, this has led me to believe that the soul creates feeling and emotion and sentience. So if we go right back to the beginning, prehistory, where the idea is about being, the soul is about being sentient, alive, movement. Being sentient means you're feeling and existing in the experience around you. Your body and your mind and your soul are responding emotionally to the experiences that you're having. So if you've had some really horrific experiences and you're trying to not feel those feelings, or you simply cannot cope with it, a lot of us turn to addiction to numb those feelings. But the consequences of this is it numbs everything else as well. I feel that the person is going through a process of killing the soul. They don't want to feel their reality anymore. They don't want to be with their emotional experience. They don't want to be authentic with what's happened to them. Authenticity is linked to the soul, therefore they're trying to kill it or disconnect from it or completely numb it. And this is where the expression, the light has gone out of their eyes, I feel, really comes from. I've heard people say to me, they're just not there anymore. Even though they're functioning and they're alive, they've gone. And I think this is where they've managed to kill or disconnect from their soul. These people actually don't have a soul. And the term I have for them are people eaters. Now, they're not physically eating people, but when I tuned into them, and it only happened twice, which means it's very rare. The idea or the concept that I saw is that they eat people. So the eating is actually symbolic of them eating the essence, the innocence, the souls, the emotions, the energy of others. Because what's actually happening in here is they are soulless. So it's empty, it's void of feeling. So what I noticed with these types of people immediately is they don't have a guide. And this is where I went, they don't have a soul. If you're someone into spirituality, you generally believe that there is a higher version of you that you're trying to achieve. Now, if you look at guides, their job is generally to lead you to that higher version of yourself. And this may be why people argue about the higher self actually being the guide. The guide is actually you guiding yourself, whereas other people believe that the guide is separate, but it's connected to the higher self and the mission that the higher self wants to achieve, and the guide is trying to communicate and guide you through that experience. Now, the guide is also connected to the soul, because if you are going through the experience of existing, you are feeling your experience through emotions and physical sensations. Now, if you think about people that completely lack empathy or morality or remorse, they are not feeling. So there's no connection to the soul. If there's no connection to the soul, there's no connection to the guide or the higher self. So therefore, they are soulless. And this is quite a scary experience for someone as a psychic who reads the mind and also talks to the guides, because the guides give me information to tell the person about what their next steps are in life. And then I also read their mind and look at what the subconscious needs are as well and connect them together. So soulless people are people eaters because they're trying to feel something. So they steal it from others. These people are very dangerous, and I definitely recommend staying away from them if you've had an experience with someone that completely lacks empathy, remorse, and morality. So lastly, we're going to talk about the fragmented soul. Now, I've also witnessed this twice, and it's very rare. So I'm going to tell you how I read. So when I go into someone's mind, I'm connecting with their subconscious experience. Now, the subconscious is divided into parts. As we experience different events and trauma, the mind fractures and creates personas. These personas become part of the subconscious. When I'm talking to the subconscious, I'm talking to these personas. So a really simple way to explain this is like sometimes I'll talk to the inner child or the angry teenager or the part that's fearful. The most dominant parts of the subconscious mind are the ones that communicate with me the most. Now, I like to feel that when I'm in the subconscious mind, it's contained. But I've had an experience, well, two experiences, where the mind is so severely fractured that that fractured part or persona has completely disconnected from the subconscious arena and has externalized itself outside of the subconscious mind, and it takes on its own personality and entity or even energetic existence outside of the person. They're still with the person, but they're not part of the subconscious team, so to speak. And I've had conversations with these parts of the fragmented mind where we're speaking into how that happened, why it happened, and how the person can then integrate that fragmented part of themselves back into their subconscious team. So I truly believe that the soul is experienced through feeling, through being connected to this reality, through looking at who we really are, through acknowledging the parts that we have suppressed, ignored, pushed away, or disconnected from, and bringing them closer. Acknowledging them, creating space, and moving into a place of acceptance and integration so that we can really see who we are and come into a place of authenticity. Because when you think about it, the higher self wants you to be authentic and be in this experience. And this is what I believe the soul to be. So please feel free to share your own ideas, concepts and experiences about the soul, and even your own. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon.